Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're returning to Zimbabwe, looking again at this really persistent issue of witchcraft accusations against the elderly.
Especially in the Buhera region, yeah. This is what our fourth deep dive touching on this. We had echoes of Buhera, the village whispers.
Exactly. And there's a very recent case from Buhera that just, well, it really highlights the problem continuing.
Right. Tell us about that one.
Okay, so two women, both 68 years old, they were accused by a Tsikamutanda, that's the term for a witch hunter, a guy named Finas Mutetwa.
Okay.
He claimed they used witchcraft to cause a death. Said he found some kind of, harmful concoction at one of their homes.
And let me guess, the accusation itself was enough.
Pretty much. The traditional court fined them. Get this, 3 cattle and $580, based just on his word.
Wow. 3 cattle. That's significant. It just shows the power these figures have, doesn't it? And how quickly an accusation can lead to serious consequences, even without real proof.
Right. But here's the thing. The women didn't just accept it. They actually fought back.
Good for them.
Yeah. They reported Mutetwa to the police. And he ended up getting fined $100 or 20 days in jail for making false claims.
Okay, so some accountability there. A small amount, maybe, but it's something.
It is. But it really sets up what we want to explore today. Where do these accusations even come from? What's the real impact on people? And how does the law fit in or not fit in?
Yeah, the roots of it all. It often seems to start when something bad happens, doesn't it?
How so?
Well, think about it. In communities where traditional beliefs are strong, if there's this sudden death or a strange illness, or maybe the crops fail unexpectedly, people look for reasons. And sometimes the explanation they land on is supernatural. Witchcraft becomes, the answer.
So it's almost like a coping mechanism for misfortune, but one that unfortunately points fingers within the community.
Exactly. And that's where people like the Tsikamutanda step in. Their whole role is basically to identify the supposed witches.
How do they do that? What are their methods?
Well, it varies. Can involve rituals, maybe some kind of divination, often very public pronouncements, naming names, and these can catch on fast in a community that's already anxious.
So they have this informal power, even if the official legal system doesn't recognize them.
That's a really crucial point. Their influence comes from those existing community fears and beliefs about witchcraft. When they point someone out, it taps right into that anxiety. And people might just accept it, leading to social pressure or, like in that Buhera case, even traditional court judgments. They can really inflame a situation.
Which brings us to the really difficult part, the human cost. We found some incredibly upsetting stories.
Yeah, some are just brutal. Take the case of Takudzwa Mugari in Gworu.
What happened there?
He was 27. He murdered his own grandmother. She was 94.
Oh my God. Why?
He accused her of witchcraft, said she was using it against him. He attacked her with a log. He got 18 years in prison for it.
Attacking his 94-year-old grandmother is just hard to process.
And it shows how these accusations can just destroy families from the inside. And sadly, it's not unique. There was that awful case in Chivi, too.
Tell us about that one.
Fidelis Mandava, a 72-year-old man, 8 members of his own family tortured him for over 10 hours.
10 hours? With what?
They used switches from a mulberry tree, all because they suspected him of witchcraft. He died 4 days later from the injuries.
That's just horrific, the level of violence within a family unit.
It shows the intense fear these beliefs can generate. Unimaginable cruelty.
And beyond the physical violence, there's the banishment, the total isolation. We heard about Kulunit Moyo.
Yeah, his story really highlights the social death that can happen. He was 90 years old, labeled a witch, forced out of his community.
Did he have family?
He'd already lost his wife and 5 children, his other 4 children.
Yeah.
They abandoned him after the accusation. He ended up at the Gwanda Old People's Home.
These homes sound like vital safe havens.
Absolutely. They take in people who've been completely ostracized. And it's not just men, of course. Mbuya Zokinyukembo from Maronda.
What's her story?
Accused by her husband, by the community, she lived outside, literally in the open, for 4 years.
4 years, just because of an accusation?
Yes. Eventually, she found shelter at the Idaweko Old People's Home. They provide crucial support when your own community turns its back.
And then Elizabeth Manhando at Mutikitsizi Old People's Home, her case was slightly different.
A bit. She's 92. The accusation against her was that she used witchcraft to cause her own infertility.
Wow. So they blamed her for her own situation, using witchcraft as the reason.
Exactly. It shows how personal struggles get twisted up in these beliefs. She had to seek refuge just to escape the hostility.
These stories, they really make it concrete, don't they? the sheer devastation these accusations cause. So what does the actual law in Zimbabwe say about all this?
Right, the legal side. Well, Zimbabwe has the Witchcraft Suppression Act.
Okay, and what does that do?
On paper, it seems comprehensive. It makes practicing witchcraft illegal, but crucially, it also makes accusing someone of witchcraft illegal.
So technically, accusing those women in Buhera, like Mutepwa did, is against the law.
Technically, yes, but, well, you see the problem. These cases keep happening. There's clearly a big gap between the law books and what happens on the ground.
Why is that gap so wide?
It really comes down to the clash between the formal legal system and the very powerful traditional belief systems. Plus, you have traditional justice chiefs, headmen, who hold a lot of sway in rural areas.
Mm-hmm.
They often handle local disputes, including witchcraft accusations, sometimes operating pretty independently of the formal courts. So the Witchcraft Suppression Act might just not get enforced consistently, or it gets ignored in favor of a traditional ruling.
So you have a national law designed to protect people, but local traditional authority and beliefs can effectively override it, especially further out from the cities.
That's exactly the tension. The influence of traditional leaders, combined with how strongly people hold these beliefs, means the legal protections often don't reach the people who need them most. It's inconsistent.
And it seems elderly women are caught in the crosshairs so often. Why them specifically? Is there a reason they're more vulnerable?
That's a really key question. And yeah, there seem to be several factors. One is definitely social isolation.
How so?
Well, as women get older, especially if they're widowed, they might live alone. They might not have a strong network around them anymore.
So fewer people to stand up for them. If someone makes an accusation, they become easier targets.
Precisely. Makes them a potential scapegoat when something goes wrong in the community. And then there can be economic factors, too.
Like what?
Jealousy over property, maybe land, especially for widows. Accusations could be a way to try and pressure them, maybe even take their assets. It's grim, but it happens.
Right.
And you also have to consider, the underlying patriarchal structures in some communities. Older women, sometimes seen as holding a certain kind of power or knowledge, might be viewed with suspicion or resentment by some.
So it's this horrible mix.
Mm-hmm.
Isolation, maybe economic jealousy, and gender dynamics all playing a part.
Absolutely. It's that complex intersection of social and cultural issues that creates this specific vulnerability for older women.
Okay, so given how serious this is, what's being done, what can be done? We mentioned the old people's homes like Gwanda and Mudikitsisi.
Yeah, and their role is just critical. They're literal lifelines. They provide safety, shelter, a community for people who've lost everything because of an accusation. It's about restoring dignity, too.
You can't solve the whole problem, right? They're dealing with the aftermath. What about addressing the root causes?
That's the bigger challenge, definitely. And it needs a broader approach. Community education is huge.
How do you mean?
Really getting into communities and challenging these beliefs directly, promoting critical thinking, talking openly about the lack of evidence for witchcraft, raising awareness, maybe fostering more dialogue between generations, bridging gaps between traditional views and other perspectives. And then there's a legal side again.
Strengthening the act.
Looking at potential reforms, yeah. How can the Witchcraft Suppression Act be enforced more effectively? How can we make sure the rights of the accused are protected, both in formal courts and in traditional systems?
It sounds like it needs action on multiple fronts: cultural beliefs, education, legal protection, social safety nets.
Exactly. It's not a simple fix.
And we really would encourage you, listening to this, to think about your own views. How do deeply held beliefs, traditions affect people's rights and safety in any community?
It really forces you to grapple with how societies balance tradition, especially when parts of that tradition cause real harm to vulnerable people. It's a tough conversation.
It really is. So as we wrap up this deep dive, you're just left with the devastating impact of these beliefs when they go unchecked. The stories we heard, lives lost, families completely broken by suspicion, elderly people exiled.
They're powerful reminders of the real human cost. It's sobering to think how something like tradition, often a source of strength, can become so destructive when fear takes over.
Yeah. Consider the weight of tradition when it clashes with individual rights and the safety of the most vulnerable among us.